Dun 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 dun. Hey there, fellow dudes. My name is Parker, and today we're talking about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is directed by James Mangold. James Mangold has directed a few major blockbusters over the past few years. One of my personal favorites from 2021, Ford v Ferrari, and then before that he did the Logan movie and the Wolverine movie. But obviously this man has had an illustrious career. He's done a lot of films throughout his time, and let me tell you what, he handles an Indiana Jones movie pretty well. A lot of critiques I've been seeing online about this movie, specifically from the critic side of things, is that James Mangold is doing his best impersonation of Steven Spielberg. Obviously, this is the first Indiana Jones movie not to be directed by Steven Spielberg. A lot of people are talking about how James Mangold is just trying to copy the Spielbergisms, the Spielberg feel of the movie. And I don't understand that critique, to be honest with you. Indiana Jones and Spielberg are synonymous with one another. His feel, his tone is Indiana Jones, is the Indiana Jones movie, so I don't understand why it's a negative and a bad thing to be trying to recreate that tone that has been synonymous with the franchise for so long. I feel like today, especially in the era of reboots, there's always this question being laid out, what is it doing differently and what is it doing new to allow it to exist? But sometimes I think a movie and a franchise comes along where you just want it to be what it is. And James Mangold, I think, understood that. What makes a great Indiana Jones movie? What do people love about these films? And he puts it all in there. I was fairly excited for this film. Indiana Jones holds a special place in my heart. It's one of those childhood franchises that I watched as a kid. Because of that, I was excited, but I was trying not to get my expectations too high. And I gotta say, I really enjoyed this film. I had a lot of fun with this film. This film has a lot of great set pieces. It has a lot of action. It's got a lot of heart to it. It feels like an Indiana Jones movie. To me, that's all I could ever ask for and all I could ever want. There's definitely a better movie to be told here. I think some of the themes could have been expanded on. There could have been a little more emotional depth to the film. But at the same time, it's an Indiana Jones movie, and you don't go for nuanced performances and for deep and emotionally profound feelings. You go for fun. You go for the adventure. And this movie captures that spirit. Obviously, we need to talk about the prologue of this movie. So about the first 15-20 minutes of this movie is a flashback sequence back in the 1930s where Indiana Jones has been captured by the Nazis because he's trying to get these precious artifacts back, specifically the dagger that pierced the side of Christ. And throughout this sequence, the Nazis and Indy figure out that the artifact is a fake, but there is another artifact that a specific Nazi has called the... Actually, I need to look this up real quick. The Antikythera mechanism, the Antikythera. So yeah, Mads Mikkelsen character, who is the Nazi and the villain of this movie, he has part of that mechanism. And the whole concept is it's this mechanism to create a ripple in time and allow you to move throughout history. And that's kind of the folk tale behind it. And so throughout this whole prologue, Indy's been captured and he's trying to escape from the Nazis, and there's this big action sequence on a train where he's busting out and beating a bunch of Nazis, and he ends up saving his friend that's along for the ride and gets this artifact away from the Nazis. Let me just say that this was such a great opener, and I know everyone's already been talking about it, everyone's going to continue to be talking about it, is the CGI in this movie, but specifically the de-aging technology. And I'll be the first to say that the technology is not quite there yet. But that doesn't take away from the fact that this opening prologue is pure Indiana Jones. It's just so much fun. The action and the choreography is so well done, and it's got that Indiana Jones charm to it. Just a lot of great humor and action interwoven into each other. I will say something else about the prologue and the de-aging technology, and what I found even more distracting than the de-aged face itself is Harrison Ford's voice I don't think they tried to do anything to make him sound a little bit younger. And so it's not as much of a problem when the action sequences are going on and he's yelling, because he still has that similar tone and voice when he gets loud as a younger Harrison Ford. But when he's just having normal conversation, it very much sounds like an older Harrison Ford, and not the same voice and tone as Indiana Jones back in his 30s. So yeah, the CGI in this movie has been a hot topic, and a lot of people are upset, and I understand. These movies originally came out in the 80s, and CGI wasn't really there, and so just about everything that was filmed was done in a practical sense. And I still am a strong supporter of practical filmmaking. I think anything that you can do in the camera, that you can do on set, is going to turn out a lot better than just gobbles of CGI. But I'm also someone who's not overtly critical of a bunch of CGI, and I don't necessarily get up in arms when things are filled with CGI. And so it's something I notice. It's something that's a part of films. It's something that's definitely a part of this film, but it doesn't take much, if anything, away from my enjoyment of the film itself. Obviously, John Williams is back for this film. John Williams, I don't know if he's ever missed. This man can't miss. The Indiana Jones themes are interwoven so beautifully throughout this film, and every time that they're played underneath scenes, it elevates those scenes just because of the emotional connection that we, the audience, and we, the fans, have. Obviously, the movie shows respect to the Indiana Jones franchise in general, but I was really curious of how they were going to handle the Crystal Skull, and I felt they did that really well. They didn't just shove Crystal Skull aside and say, this movie didn't exist, don't think about it, it's not relevant. There are still pieces of that movie that ripple into this movie. And it doesn't play a major factor, but I appreciate the fact that they didn't run away from their own history as a franchise, and they still embraced it. And some of the choices that they did make, I wish they had leaned into a little bit more, specifically involving Indy's son, who's not in the film, who was played by Shia LaBeouf in The Crystal Skull, but something happens to his son, and there's this drama that resonates between himself and his family and the people around him because of that, and that's kind of where we find Indy at the start of this film. But I would have really loved for that to have been an emotional through line throughout the story, and I don't think it quite hits on that. And that's the reality as well, as I don't think that this movie hits on all of the themes as deeply and as profoundly as I think that they could. It just feels like there's a better story underneath the surface, and if they had taken a little more time for a few more rewrites and revisions, we could have gotten something really tight and really strong that emotionally resonated throughout the entirety of this film. But at the same time, we still got a really fun and enjoyable Indiana Jones movie. So I've talked a bit about the good of this film, but there are some bads, and there are some things that we need to talk about because this is not a perfect film. This movie has a supernatural element to it again, like prior Indiana Jones movies, and I don't have a problem with those. And I actually don't have a problem with this movie and the choices that they made, and I actually really like how this event plays out in comparison to, let's say, The Crystal Skull. I still think Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade have better supernatural climaxes, but this one really works for me in a lot of ways. The issue I have with the third act is actually how it ends. The movie ends in somewhat of an anticlimactic way. And I was thinking about this for a little while, and I think the problem I have with it is that Indiana Jones isn't given a choice. He doesn't make a choice or decision. He's still blinded by his flawed thinking, and that he's a relic of his time, that nobody cares about history anymore. And he believes that all the way to the climax of the movie, and then he gets punched and taken back to his home, and you never see that growth, really. You never see that character development and change, and it's not earned. And so I just don't like how anticlimactic it was of him trying to make a decision and then someone else makes the decision for him. And I would have loved for his character to have come to the realization a different way. I will say the final scene I actually really did enjoy. So after the climax of the movie, we're back in Indiana Jones' apartment, and there's a very strong emotional scene there, and Harrison Ford has a really great performance in that, and I couldn't help but have a big smile on my face as someone who loves the franchise and the character as well. And to want to see quote unquote a happy ending. But yeah, the third act and everything revolving around it, really liked, just didn't like the way that it ended. Felt very anticlimactic. The characters in this movie are interesting. So apart from Indiana Jones and the legacy characters that show off in very brief sequences, I wasn't a fan of the characters. Specifically Phoebe Waller-Bridge as Helena Shaw. She's a very unlikable character. She comes off very pretentious. You just don't really like her, and I know the film is kind of building her up in that way to an extent, but by the end of the movie, the goal is that you've overcome that and that you do like her and that she's had her character growth. And I don't dislike her by the end of the movie, but I still don't like her. It's not really the performance itself, it's more of the way the character was written, I think, unfortunately. It just comes off lackluster. And then also our Nazi villain, Mads Mikkelsen. He's kind of a cookie cutter villain. He's evil to be evil because he's a Nazi and he wants to see Nazism reign and rule, and there's not much more to him. There's not a whole lot of depth beyond that. He wants to get this artifact so he can go back in time and take out Hitler and fix the mistakes that Hitler made so that Germany wins the war, and you know, that's kind of how it is. I don't have any problems with that. Sometimes a villain is just meant to be an obstacle for your protagonist. And that's all Mads Mikkelsen really is. He's threatening, he's demeaning, he has that great look, he has that presence around him when he's on screen. But at the same time, character-wise, there isn't much depth to it. But again, that being said, it's an Indiana Jones movie, and there are certain things that I can look past because that's not what I'm looking for in this type of movie. I just want to have fun. I want to be along for the ride with Indiana Jones, and I want to be entertained, and those are the things that I got out of this movie. So, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, definitely enjoyable film, great summer blockbuster. I highly recommend you go out and watch it, especially if you are a fan of the franchise. You're going to get a lot out of this, and I think a lot of people are going to enjoy this movie a lot more than Crystal Skull. It's a great send-off for Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. Gives another memorable performance. There's a lot of homages to the older films as well that'll bring smiles to your faces. The movie is filled with great action, good humor, an enjoyable story as well. So guys, that's what I thought of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. What did you think? Leave a comment below and make sure to like and subscribe to Fellow Dude and Dude Reacts if you want more of these movie reviews. Until next time, fellow dudes, see you then.